my PhD. I prefer to talk about it is because it's a bit more appealing and it's I can draw more pictures and try to convey the ideas more easily than some more technical works which are more recent. So I will quickly remind you of what a planar graph is. So here is a drawing of the graph called K4. Right? And in this particular drawing, you see there is a point where two edges cross each other, but you can easily get rid of this by redrawing as follows, right? And now this is what we call a planar embedding. It's an embedding in the plane where no two edges meet except at their endpoints, which are vertices, right? Because vertices are points, so the edges will meet at vertices, but they should not meet anywhere else, like here. Okay, and a graph that admits a planar embedding is a planar graph, right? So I won't write down the definition. Hopefully it's clear. Okay, so I just want to start this as a warm up. In any case, planarity is important to our talk. Okay, so, well, I'll just maybe write down a graph G is planar if it admits a planar embedding. Is my voice and video everything clear enough?
You're fine. You could be a little louder.
I could be a little louder. Okay. I don't know if my microphone is being used or is it using my laptop. I'll
It's
just take
fine.
a,
Don't worry about it.
let me just take a quick look. Um, no, I think it is using my microphone. Yeah, it is using my microphone. Okay. So that's what a planar graph is. And some of you who may be familiar, slightly familiar with graph theory might have heard of the Krotowski theorem. Krotowski's theorem says that it basically gives you an if and only if condition for a graph to be planar. So I want to just quickly tell you about Krotowski's theorem. So we just saw that K4, the complete graph on 4 vertices, is planar. However, this graph here, K5, is not planar, as can be proved quite easily using the Jordan curve theorem or using Euler's formula. So this is a non-planar graph. And now you can actually get an easy condition for a graph to be non-planar. Well, we know that K5 is non-planar. So what you could do is you could replace each edge by a path. And such a graph is called a subdivision of K5. And clearly a subdivision of K5 is also non-planar because K5 itself is non-planar. So if you were able to draw a subdivision without crossings, then you would also be able to draw K5 itself without crossings. And now you can do something more complicated. You can add other vertices and join it to the original graph. And so now what you have is not a subdivision of K5, but you have a graph that has a subgraph that is a subdivision of K5. Right? So your big graph is G. Inside that, you have a subgraph which is drawn in black and red, H, and H is a subdivision of K5, right? So any graph that has a subgraph that is a subdivision of K5 is also non-planar because K5 itself is non-planar. And the same thing is true for K33. So K33 is this other graph. It's a complete bipartite graph, right? And K33 is also non-planar, as can be proved in many ways. Okay. And so what is easy, once you know that these two graphs are non-planar, or for that matter, any graph that is non-planar, what you can immediately write down is the following. A graph G Let me write it in the following way. Let G be a graph if G has a subgraph H that is a subdivision of K5 or of K33. Of course, you can put any planar graph, any non-planar graph here. It doesn't matter. Then you can make the statement, then the resulting graph G is non-planar. Right? So this is straightforward because we are not doing anything really difficult. We just prove that K5 and K33 are non-planar, and then we just say that, well, any graph that contains one of these two in this specific sense is also non-planar. What is really cool is Krutowski's theorem, which says that this is actually if and only if. So any graph that is non-planar is non-planar precisely because it has a subgraph that is a subdivision of K5 or K33. Okay? For example, the Peterson graph is non-planar. That's the very famous Peterson graph, which also plays a very important role in my own area of research, matching theory. It is actually where it was discovered in some sense. This graph is non-planar, and you can demonstrate that by finding a subdivision of K33 in the Peterson graph. And I will leave it as an exercise why the two drawings I have drawn are isomorphic. Let me use a different color. So what you do is you subdivide three edges of K33 and you add a new vertex and you join it to the three subdivision vertices. And these two graphs are exactly the same, right? So the Peterson graph is non-planar, as per Krutowski's theorem, can be explained because of a subdivision of K33 sitting inside it. Okay? And so this is this sort of the stereotypical result that you are looking for in structural graph theory, which tells you that for a certain property of the graph, like non-planarity, you have some small number of subgraphs which are the obstructions, and these are the only obstructions. This is sort of the holy grail as far as graph theory results are concerned, right? So this is the famous Krutowski theorem from 1930. Okay. Are there any questions at this point? Okay. So, well, Krutowski proved this, and then people asked various questions. They asked, well, what about, oh, I see, isomorphic, right. Okay. Well, so isomorphic, I actually, in my lectures and when I teach the course, I actually don't use the word isomorphic at all. So I will just give you an example. This graph here is the same as this graph here. Why? To make it very rigorous, what you could say is you can take a labeling of the vertices 1, 2, 3, 4. And now I can give you a labeling of these vertices so that whenever two vertices are connected here, whenever I and J are connected in this drawing, you will see that I and J are also connected in this drawing. Okay. So basically, it's just a different way of drawing a graph. Essentially, two graphs are isomorphic. If you're looking at their drawings, basically it just means that it's a different way of drawing the same graph. So from now on, I will not use the word isomorphic. I will just say that the subgraph is a subdivision of K33, rather than saying that the subgraph is isomorphic to a subdivision of K33. Okay, I'm just going to do away with the term isomorphic. Does that make sense? Okay, I need to look at the chat box, so let me do that. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Tanya. Okay, any other questions? Do you want me to repeat the definition of a subdivision? Is that right, Dia? Yeah. So subdivision just means that if this is your graph K4, let me take a different graph, let's say. I took K4 minus one edge just to have some variation. Then a subdivision of K4 is where you replace each edge by a path. Okay, so I can put a vertex here, I can put some vertices here. And now what I have is a subdivision of the original graph. Is that good? Okay, thank you. Okay. Okay, so is everybody clear with Krutowski's theorem? What we are saying is that if a graph is non-planar, then any subdivision of that graph will be non-planar. And now any graph that contains such a subdivision which also be non-planar. So if you have a bigger graph that contains a smaller graph, which is a subdivision of K5, then the big graph will also be non-planar because K5 is non-planar, right? And Krutowski's theorem is saying that this is if and only if. Whenever a graph is non-planar, it's precisely because there is a subdivision of K5 or K33 inside it as a subgraph. And the example is here. The Peterson graph is non-planar because here you see a subdivision of K33 in red color and black color. That is a subgraph of the big graph. And you can check that these are just two drawings of the same graph. Two different drawings of Peterson graph. And so in a mathematical textbook, you would say that these are isomorphic graphs. But I'm just going to say that they are different drawings of the same graph. So there is a question from Dia. Can you prove this for any other graph? Could you elaborate on what you mean by this?
Hello.
Yes.
Am I audible?
Yes, you're audible, Dia. Thank you.
Yeah, I wanted to ask if you can explain the subdivision in any other type of graph. Like how is K33 and K5 included in any other graph?
Well, so subdivision is defined for any graph, right? So when I gave you this example right now, I took a different graph, right? This is a different graph, K4 minus one edge.
Yeah.
And a subdivision is just this. You just take any edge and you put vertices on that edge. Or in other words, you replaced any edge by a path, right? So this definition has nothing to do with K5 or K33. For any graph, you can define a subdivision of the graph. Does that make sense?
Okay. Yeah.
Right?
Thank you.
Okay. So the reason K5 and K33 are important is because what Krutowski's theorem is saying that these are the only two graphs you need to exclude to get a planar graph. You don't need to exclude any other graph in the world to make sure that your graph is planar. And that is why K5 and K33 are important. But many of the other things we discussed, they do not depend on K5 or K33. So the definition of a subdivision does not depend on K5 or K33. Is that good? Okay. Anyways, so this is what Krutowski's theorem says. And it gives you information about when a graph is non-planar, right? Okay. And after this theorem, people ask various sorts of questions. They ask, well, what if you have a graph that is non-planar? So what are the kind of questions you can ask once you see a theorem like Krutowski's theorem? Supposing G is a non-planar graph, right? Then you know by Krutowski's theorem that either G contains K5 or G contains K33. And by contains, I mean exactly how we discussed it. There is a subgraph, which is a subdivision of K5 or K33, right? And now you could ask the following question. Which non-planar graphs do not contain K5, right? And you can ask the same question for K33, right? And these questions have been asked and they have been answered very well. So we know exactly which non-planar graphs do not contain K5 and the ones that do not contain K33. Okay? So these questions have been answered. Okay? And this talk is not about Krotowski's theorem. This talk is about a different topic in graph theory called matching theory. Okay, but the point of this initial part was to give you some idea of what a typical type of question we will be asking looks like. Okay, so are there any questions until this point? Okay, if not, then I'll proceed to matching theory. So what is a matching? Well, I won't care about matching, I'll care about perfect matching. So what is a perfect matching in a graph? So if this is your graph G, then a perfect matching is a set of edges so that if you look at any vertex, you will see exactly one edge from the set. So in this particular case, the red colored edges constitute one perfect matching. This is perfect matching. Of the graph G, right? So G is always the graph I draw. Okay. So to write a formal definition, a perfect matching M is a subset of the edges such that if you look at any vertex, so this is my notation for edges incident at a vertex. So if you have a vertex V, then partial V refers to these edges. Okay? And I want this set to be equal to 1 for each vertex of the graph. So if you look at this drawing here, at every single vertex, you will see exactly one red colored edge. Is that clear? And perfect matchings have been studied extensively in graph theory, and they have come up in various other areas of research, including economics, statistical mechanics in physics, organic chemistry, and so on and so forth, and game theory and many areas of computer science and operations research, right? So perfect matchings have been studied extensively. And in fact, there is a whole book called Matching Theory by Lowas and Plummer. So if you're interested, you can take a look at this book. Lowas, Plummer, 1986, Matching Theory. Okay. So in this particular graph that we have drawn, you can also find other perfect matchings. For example, instead of the red perfect matching, you could take the green perfect matching. Yeah? Is everybody clear with what a perfect matching is? Is the definition clear? Thank you. And one of the very interesting questions that we don't have any answers, very clear answers on, is counting the number of perfect matchings of a graph. So there are many problems that are open in matching theory. One particular question that is open that I will just mention briefly is, I will just say vaguely, counting the number of perfect matchings in any graph. So what do I mean by this is an open problem? I'm deliberately not making it precise. There are various kinds of open problems when you start thinking about counting perfect matchings. There are algorithmic problems. There are enumerative problems where you are looking for formulas for specific kinds of graphs. And there are also various structural problems. But that is not the topic of this lecture. The reason I'm mentioning this is because this is a problem where you only care for the perfect matchings of a graph. So for example, if this is your graph, then in this graph, you can check that this edge is not in any perfect matching. And so if you are interested in counting the number of perfect matchings, you can throw away all the edges that do not belong to any perfect matching. Okay? And then you can look at the resulting graph. So if you do that in this particular drawing, what you will get is, you will get two smaller graphs. Because you threw away one edge. And now these graphs, you may look at the connected components. So in most areas of graph theory, you don't need to work with disconnected graphs, right? So this is a disconnected graph. The whole graph, if you look at it, it's a disconnected graph. But if you look at just these two blocks, they are connected graphs. And so in most areas of graph theory, you don't need to worry about disconnected graphs, right? So in particular in matching theory, you can assume that your graph is connected, and you can assume that every single edge of the graph belongs to some perfect matching. Okay? So that brings us to an important definition. Matching covered graph. What are the properties? It is a connected graph, and each edge belongs to some perfect matching. So in particular, the graph I drew here, G, is not matching covered because this edge does not belong to any perfect matching. However, these two smaller graphs, G1 and G2, you can check that they are matching covered. They are connected graphs, and every edge belongs to some perfect matching. Is this definition clear? Okay, thank you. So in matching theory, I mean, this is a bit vague, but basically what I mean is, if you only care about perfect matchings, like I do, then it is common to assume it is maybe not common, it is one may assume without loss of generality that a given graph is matching covered. Right? So if you look at Lowas Plummer, for example, the vast majority of their book actually is talking about matching covered graphs. Back then, 1986, they were not called matching covered graphs. Back then, the common term was one extendable graphs. Okay, but these days, the more commonly used term is a matching covered graph. So there is some question, let's see. Okay, no, everything is fine. Okay. Okay, good. So now, so matching covered graphs, there is a extensive literature on them, and we won't have time to cover many things actually. I was hoping to talk about ER decompositions, but I don't think there'll be time to cover that. So I will try to focus on Lovaas's theorem that I want to tell you about. So let me remind you quickly of Kuratowski's theorem, right? I will just write one direction. Every non-planar graph contains a subgraph. Maybe I should say has a subgraph that is a subdivision of K5 or of K33. Okay, that was Kuratowski's theorem, the difficult direction of Kuratowski's theorem. Now it turns out that in matching theory, the notion of containment is just slightly more complicated. In particular, you need to take into account the matching structure of the graph. So I will give you an example. So I want to tell you about Lovaas's theorem from 1983, which is very similar to Kuratowski's theorem, but in a different context. So Lovaas's theorem is about non-bipartite matching covered graphs. Is everybody clear with bipartite versus non-bipartite? Do I need to define what is a non-bipartite graph or a bipartite graph? Okay, should I define it? Tanya, should I define non-bipartite? Okay, okay, I will define it. So, okay. So a graph is bipartite if you can color the vertices in two colors such that, so let's say I will use two colors, red and blue. Okay. So this graph is bipartite because what I can do is I can color the vertices with red and blue so that every edge joins a red vertex to a blue vertex. So this graph is a bipartite graph. You can put all the red vertices here and you can put all the blue vertices here and all the edges will go like this. Is that clear? Okay. And you can check for yourself that the triangle, for example, is non-bipartite. Okay. So in general, in graph theory, it is very common that an open problem can be solved for bipartite graphs today, but it cannot be solved for non-bipartite graphs for another 50 to 100 years. And this happens all the time in matching theory. It's like a super common phenomenon. Okay. So that is why you will see a lot of literature distinguishing between bipartite graphs and non-bipartite graphs because the difficulty of problems changes significantly between these two classes. Okay. And so what Lovaas proved, he focused on non-bipartite graphs because bipartite graphs, people had already made a lot of progress. And in the context of non-bipartite matching covered graphs, he proved a theorem similar to Kuratowski's theorem. So I will write down the theorem and then I will give you all the definitions. Okay. So has a subgraph. I want you to compare these two. I want you to compare these two results. Okay. But instead of a okay, so I'm leaving some space. That is a subdivision of blah or blah. Okay. So this is Lovaas's theorem. I need to fill in the blanks. What are the blanks? There are 4 blanks here. So the first blank is the subgraph needs a property called conformal subgraph. I will define this in a few minutes. It is not any subdivision. It is going to be a bi-subdivision. I will tell you what that is. And it is not going to be K5 or K33. It is going to be K4 or the triangular prism. And I will draw this to show you what it is. Okay. So is the high level idea of Lovaas's theorem clear? There are undefined terms. I'm going to define them. But I just want you to compare this theorem with Krotowski's theorem. Are there any questions at this point? Apart from the definitions that I have not defined? I mean, apart from the terms I have not defined? Okay, thank you. All right, so in order to explain this definition, all of these definitions, I want to use some examples. Let us look at the Peterson graph. Oh, no, maybe not the Peterson graph. Let us look at this graph. So Gaurav, how much more time do I have?
Well, at least 20 more minutes.
At least 20 more minutes. And at most, how much?
22.
Sorry?
I mean, maybe we can take 5 or 10 minutes more.
5 or 10 minutes more. Okay, I'll just keep that in mind. Thanks. Okay, so what I want you to do is I want you to look at this subgraph here. So I've taken 4 vertices and I'm going to join any 2 vertices by a path. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now I need to connect this one with this one here like this. And then I need to connect this one with this one like this. Okay. What you have is a graph that looks like this. You can redraw the subgraph, the red colored subgraph. This is what the red colored subgraph looks like. And remember, this is the graph K4. So what is happening in this case is that we have a subdivision of K4, but it's not just any subdivision. What we have done is every edge is replaced by a path of odd length. So either you could keep it as an edge, or you could make it 3 edges, or you could make it 5 edges, and so on. And when you do this, sorry, this is not 5 edges. This is 5 edges. Okay. So either you replace an edge by, well, you keep it as it is, or you replace by a path of length 3 or by a path of length 5. The length of a path is the number of edges in that path. Okay. And this kind of a subdivision is called a bi-subdivision of K4. So there is a parity requirement. You cannot replace an edge by an even length path. You have to replace it by an odd length path. Is the definition clear? Okay. So this is a bi-subdivision of K4. Okay. Another property of this graph drawn here is that when you delete the vertices, what do you get when you remove the red colored subgraph from the given graph? You will just be left with the blue colored subgraph. Let me draw the blue colored subgraph. You will be left with this graph. This is K2. And this graph has a perfect matching. So such a subgraph is called a conformal subgraph, right? So I've defined what bi-subdivision is. So this is done. Now I'm defining what a conformal subgraph is. Okay. And so the definition is that a subgraph H of a graph G is conformal if, when you delete the vertices of the graph, the remaining graph has a perfect matching. Okay? So in this case, it is very easy because it's just K2 and K2 has a perfect matching, right? Let me give you an example where there is no perfect matching. For example, I'll give you a small example. If you take this green colored subgraph in K4, when you delete this subgraph, you will be just left with one vertex. So if green colored subgraph is your H, then the graph G, where maybe I'll just say K4, K4 minus the vertices of H is just this graph, and this graph does not have a perfect matching. This is K1, does not have a perfect matching. Because there are no edges, so there cannot be a perfect matching, right? So this green colored subgraph is, this is not conformal. Okay? Is everybody with me so far? Yes, okay, thank you. Okay, good. So let us see what we have remaining, what we have left to define. Well, we already know what K4 is. We have talked about K4 a lot by now. What is this guy? This guy is the following graph. Let me erase some things. This graph here plays a very important role in matching theory, just like K4 and the Peterson graph. And this graph is called the triangular prism. Right? You have two triangles joined by a perfect matching. Okay? The reason for this notation is it's a complement of a 6 cycle. So what does that mean? I'll just tell you very quickly. It's not really crucial. So you take a 6 cycle and you remove all the edges that are there and you put in all the edges that are not there. Okay? So whatever edge is there, you remove it. Whatever edge is not there, you put an edge. And the graph you will get will be the triangular prism. Okay? But anyways, if that's a bit confusing, don't worry. We will use this notation for this graph, C6 bar. Okay? So what is Lovász' theorem saying? You take any non-bipartite matching covered graph in the world, you will always find a conformal subgraph inside it that is either a bi-subdivision of K4 or it is a bi-subdivision of the triangular prism. Okay? Good. And Lovász used this theorem to solve certain open problems in matching theory, which I do not have the time to talk about. So if you are curious, you can take a look at his 1983 paper. There he solves other problems using this theorem. Okay? But back in my PhD, we asked the following question. We know that every non-bipartite matching covered graph contains K4 or the triangular prism in this particular sense. It is a subgraph and the subgraph has to be a conformal subgraph and it has to be a bi-subdivision of K4 or prism. So now you can ask the question, which are the non-bipartite matching covered graphs that do not contain K4 or which ones do not contain the prism? Okay. So these are actually open problems. Which non-bipartite matching covered graphs do not contain K4, right? And similarly, which non-bipartite matching covered graphs do not contain the triangular prism. Okay. And just to go back to one of the examples, this is a graph here. Look at this graph. This is a non-bipartite matching covered graph. Does it contain K4? Can somebody answer this question, please? Does this matching covered graph, does this graph contain K4 in the sense that we discussed? Can you see a subgraph in this graph that is a conformal subgraph and is a bisubdivision of K4 or of the triangular prism? Anyone? Yes, the green one. Do you mean the red one? Yes, right, the red one. The red subgraph here, as we discussed, the H, the red colored subgraph, is a bisubdivision of K4, and that is a conformal subgraph of the big graph. And so in this sense, this graph contains K4. However, you can prove, I won't prove it here, you can prove that this graph does not contain the triangular prism. Okay, so this particular graph, G, is K4 based because it contains K4, and it is prism free because it does not contain the prism. Okay, so is the usage of based and free clear? Whenever a graph contains K4, I will say it is K4 based, otherwise I'll say it is K4 free, right? And the same way for the prism. Okay, good. So in other words, which graphs are K4 free? Which ones are K4 free? And which ones are prism free? Okay. So these are open problems. What we did in my PhD is we solved these problems for planar graphs. So in this published paper by myself and my advisor USR Murthy, we solved these problems. We solved the above problems only when the given graph is planar. Right? And we have already discussed planarity, so I don't need to define that, right? So what is one of the takeaways of this so far? Often problems are solved easily for planar graphs. Both of these problems are open for non-planar graphs, and I don't think they are anywhere close to being solved. Some of us have spent a lot of time on solving these problems for non-planar graphs, and we have failed miserably. Okay, good. Are there any questions at this point? Okay, if not, then I will tell you a little bit about the solution. We don't have a lot of time to talk about the solution, but I will try to give you some idea about the solution to these problems. And in particular, in the interest of time, I will focus on K4 free and I will ignore prism free. Okay? But some of the things apply to both problems. Okay? So our solution proceeds in 2 steps. So there is an important concept in matching covered graphs called the tight cut decomposition. And if you have the handout that I have, Gaurav has circulated, then you can take a look at that handout now or later. So there is a particular concept called a tight cut decomposition of matching covered graphs. I will very quickly tell you about the tight cut decomposition by an example, and I will not write down all the formal definitions. Let's see, how do I want to draw this? Okay, so consider the following graph. Okay, trust me, this is a non-bipartite, which is easy to see, matching covered graph. Okay, now what you can check here, look at this, these three edges. This is called a cut of the graph. What does a cut mean? You divide the vertices into two parts, left and right, and you look at all the edges going from left to right or from bottom to top in this drawing. Okay, so this is called a cut of the graph, and this cut has the property. This cut has the property that for every perfect matching of the graph, it will use exactly one edge from the cut. Okay, for example, if you take the following perfect matching, if I take this edge, then I will have to take this edge, and then I have some freedom. So if you look at the red and the green, right? So red is these three edges, the three edges crossing the red line. Okay, if you want to color them red, you can color them red. If you look at the red and the green, there is exactly one intersection between them. And that is what a tight cut is. Okay, so such a cut is called a tight cut. And what you can do when you have a tight cut is you can get two smaller graphs. What you would do is you would shrink the bottom part into a single vertex, and you would shrink the top part into a single vertex. Let me just show you how it is done. So I will keep the top part as it is. And now I will shrink the bottom part, the triangle, into a single vertex. And similarly, I will get another graph by keeping the bottom part as it is. And I will shrink the top part into a single vertex. Okay, so I got two graphs. This is actually K4 in this example, and this is K33. Okay. The point is, both of these are matching covered graphs. Because this is a tight cut, you can prove this quite easily. Okay. So whenever you have a tight cut in a matching covered graph, you can get two smaller matching covered graphs by doing this operation. Okay. You keep doing this. At the end, you will have graphs which have no tight cuts. These are called the bricks and braces of the original graph. So what could happen is, one of these two graphs could also have a tight cut. And then you would do the same procedure again, right? At the end, you will get a bunch of graphs that have no tight cuts. These are called the bricks and braces of the graph. Bricks are non-bipartite, braces are bipartite. Okay? So the point of this discussion is that every non-bipartite, actually it doesn't have to be non-bipartite, every matching covered graph can be decomposed or broken down, if you like, into smaller matching covered graphs that do not have tight cuts, that do not have tight cuts. And these graphs, these smaller matching covered graphs, are called bricks if they are non-bipartite, and braces if they are bipartite. Okay. And this is actually unique. So one of the questions you might immediately ask is, well, if I have a certain graph and let's say Tanya has a certain other graph, and we both do this tight cut decomposition procedure, then will we get the same list of graphs? Lowas proved in 1987 that no matter how you do the tight cut decomposition, the final list of graphs you will get. So the list of graphs that I get will be the same as the list of graphs that Tanya gets. Okay. So this decomposition is uniquely defined in the sense that the result is unique. And this was proved by Lowas in 87. Okay, good. So the first thing we proved is that supposing you have a non-bipartite graph, let G be a non-bipartite graph, matching covered graph. We proved that G is K4 free if and only if each of its bricks is K4 free. Okay, and actually you don't need K4 here. You can also replace K4 by prism, and we are able to prove the same theorem. Actually, there's a more general theorem, but I will not define that. I will not state that here. So since we only care about K4 and prism, I will just tell you about K4 and prism. Okay, so to give you an example of this theorem on the graph that we just saw. So this is your graph G. In this case, the brick is K4. We have only one brick because the tight cut decomposition stops in just one step. And K33 is a brace. It is a bipartite matching covered graph, which has no tight cuts. So what happens in this particular graph? The brick is K4 based because it is K4 itself. And so the whole graph is K4 based by the theorem. But you can also just find it in this example. And this brick is prism free. And so the whole graph is prism free. Is it clear how this theorem is working? If you see any brick that is K4 based, then the whole graph is K4 based. And similarly, if you see any brick that is, if all bricks are K4 free, then the whole graph will be K4 free. Are there any questions at this point? Okay, thank you, Tanya. So this is the first step. And notice that this step does not have anything to do with planarity. This step does not depend on planarity, right? In the theorem statement, I did not make any assumption about the graph being planar. So that is some good news. What does this mean? This means that now you only need to worry about the K4 free bricks and the prism free bricks. So now we only need to understand or characterize K4 free bricks and prism free bricks. Okay. And these problems are open, but we were able to solve these problems for the planar case. And so that means that by the previous theorem, we were able to solve the original problems for all planar matching covered graphs. Because if your graph is planar, then all the bricks will be planar. Okay. So solution step 2 is that we were able to characterize K4 free planar bricks. And we were able to do the same for prism free, but in this talk, because we have only 5 more minutes remaining, I will only talk about K4 free. Okay. All right. So now comes an interesting point. Let's see if I can do some justice to this last topic. So if you look at K4, you see 4 faces. What are the faces of a planar graph? This is one face, F1. This is another face. This is another face. And this is yet another face. Okay, there are 4 faces. Each face has odd length. What is the length of a face? It is the boundary of that face, which in this case is a cycle. And all the graphs we will draw, it will be a cycle. Okay. So if the cycle is of odd length, odd number of edges, then we are going to say that the face is an odd face. Otherwise, it is an even face. To give you a more interesting example, in the prism, can somebody tell me how many odd faces and how many even faces? How many odd faces are there and how many even faces are there? Two odd faces and two even faces. You are almost right. The only caveat is that the outer face is also a face. So it is actually two odd faces. Yes, thank you. So there are two odd faces and three even faces. So the even faces are in blue color and the odd faces are in red color. Okay, thank you. So that's good. So in the case of K4, all the faces are odd. And now, if you take a bi-subdivision of K4, if you take any bi-subdivision of K4, this is where the parity is important. Bi-subdivision means you have to replace each edge by a path of odd length. If you take any bi-subdivision of K4, you will still have 4 odd faces. Every face will be an odd face. 4 odd faces. And also 0 even faces because there are totally 4 faces. Okay, but the important part is that there are 4 odd faces. Using this fact, you can prove that every brick, there is a property of bricks you need to use. It is called, actually no, you don't need any property of bricks, sorry. This is actually easier. Using this fact that every bi-subdivision of K4 has 4 odd faces, you can actually prove that any graph that is K4 based will also have at least 4 odd faces. So every K4 based matching covered graph has at least 4 odd faces. This is actually not difficult to prove. I will leave this to you as an exercise. Okay? Even if you have not taken a rigorous course in graph theory so far, or an in-depth course in graph theory, you might be able to figure out an intuitive reason. You may not have a formal proof, but you might be able to see why this is intuitively true. Okay? Good. What is really cool about planar bricks is that this is if and only if. Okay, so this is the next theorem. And I'm almost done actually. Let G be a not non-planar. Let G be a planar brick. What we discussed is that if G is K4 based, then G has at least 4 odd faces. But what we proved, which is the difficult direction of the theorem, is that this is if and only if. So whenever the graph has at least 4 odd faces, there will always be a K4 inside it. Okay? And that basically tells you that what are exactly all the planar K4 free bricks and what are all the planar K4 based bricks. And using the previous theorem, you can now understand all the planar K4 free matching covered graphs. And we also proved a similar theorem for prism free, but I will not be writing it down since we are almost at the end of the time. So this is it. Thank you very much. Are there any questions?
Thank you, Nishad. Really nice talk, and thank you, Tanya and Dia too, for keeping him, making sure we also understand everything. So, any other questions? Any questions? Please do feel free to show yourself.
I have a sort of more like a general question.
Yes, please.
Am I audible?
Yes, you're audible.
Yes. How would you use, let's say, this matching theory, etc., in like operations research? And you mentioned economics. So how exactly is this used there?
Okay, yes. I can mention a few things about that. So are you familiar with some operations research topics?
No, I'm a first year,
Okay,
but
okay.
I have a general idea of operations
Okay,
research
so
and what.
have you heard of the traveling salesman problem? So there is a very famous problem in operations research and optimization. It is called the traveling salesman problem. So most of these companies like Amazon, Walmart, etc., they need to solve traveling salesmen on a daily basis, right? Because what do they want to do? They have a certain warehouse and they would like to ship the products to various stores in the entire city or in the entire country. And they would like to do this in an as optimal way as possible, right? So what you would want to do is you start at a particular warehouse and you try your best to go through all the other stores, and you come back to the warehouse. And in graph theory, this is called the Hamiltonian cycle problem. The traveling salesman problem is more general because you can also have weights on the edges. So each edge may not have the same cost, right? And traveling salesman is a NP-hard problem. So in computer science theory, it's called an NP-hard problem, which basically means that to solve it exactly is it's not really possible. Any algorithm which solves it exactly takes too much time and it's computationally infeasible, right? And so we try in computer science theory and optimization, it's very important to find approximate solutions to these problems. And so there is a whole area called approximation algorithms. And in the last decade or so, there have been many breakthroughs in the traveling salesman problem. Almost all of those breakthroughs use matching theory. So they intrinsically use perfect matching theory in general, to make progress in the traveling salesman problem. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. I can say a bit more, but I'll first take more questions and then I'll maybe say a bit more about economics. Are there any other questions? Feel free to ask as many questions. I don't have anywhere to go, so I'm here.
Okay, any other questions?
I mean, I'm not sure what exactly a face is.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Right. So in a planar graph, what happens is that, you see, you're drawing this graph in the plane, right? So it is so think of this as the plane, or if you like, you can think of it as a drawing on a ball, right? What happens is, when you draw a planar graph, it will divide the plane into regions. So this, for example, is one region. This is another region, right? I'm not writing a formal definition because that is not going to serve much purpose. But you get the idea, I hope.
Yeah.
So these are the 5 regions, and these 5 regions are what we call as faces.
Wait, so since the outer edge of the graph is also a face, we can combine 2 regions to make a face as well. Is that correct?
Can you repeat that again? I didn't.
So since the outside of the graph is also a face,
Yes.
we can combine regions to make a face. Like the border of those 2 regions would then be the face.
Okay, so I will say the following. Since you mentioned the outside, right? So the outside is another face. There is no difference between the outside and inside. Because when you think of a plane, it looks like the outside is unbounded and all the other regions are bounded. But think of drawing it on a ball. So whatever can be drawn on a plane, a graph can be drawn on the plane without crossings, if and only if it can be drawn on a sphere, on the surface of a sphere, without crossings. So when you think of a sphere, now there is no outside, right? So there is no real distinction between an outside face and an inside face. Does that make sense?
Yeah, okay, I got it. Yeah.
To give you one more example, you can redraw this graph with this being the outside face. And I will just show you quickly how it is done. This is the same drawing of the same graph, where I have made a triangle to be the outside face. you can compare that these two are actually the same graphs, right?
Yeah,
So
that
in
makes
some sense, it is better to not think of the outside face as something special.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thanks, Rohan. Any other questions? Sorry, I can't hear you, Gaurav. Gaurav, your mic is mute. Yeah.
Yeah. So if there are no other questions, let us thank the speaker. I don't know how.
I'll probably say a few words about Tanya's question. I'll probably just say a little bit about economics since she asked me.
All right.
So in economics, actually, there was recently in the last few years a Nobel Prize related to organ donation. So in organ donation, you want to match people who are willing to donate organs to patients who are wanting to receive organs. And it turns out that this is actually a bipartite matching problem. So that's actually in the more healthcare sector, but you can also apply it to more economical settings where you have a market with buyers and sellers. And that is again a matching problem. So matching theory also has many applications in economics, game theory, and also in the health sector. Yeah, thanks.
Okay. Any further questions? Okay, so I'm going to stop the recording. Feel free to hang around and just say hello to Nishad.